Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. Got you covered. Traditional leagues, dynasty league, PPR league, IDP league, even daily fantasy football league. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
What's going on? It's GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network. Yes, we're back again Friday. Here, Ethan's here again. Me, Ethan, I'm here again. Friday afternoon, evening, morning, night. I'm here for the GSMC day today. I hope everyone's having a fantastic go round while you're listening to this. And if not, life will get better. Because it tends to more than not. What we have today to talk about here are some very few key points. I'm going to talk about the Patriots offense here in a second, but later on we got some budget quarterback stuff, some Andy Dalton stuff with the Cowboys and how they're getting through all this. Frank Gore is back again, like he can't go away. Then some Cam stuff. We're going to do some Cam stuff as well. But I wanted to talk about the New England Patriots offense heading into next season, as it's starting to feel like we are getting a glimpse of what they're going to be going with for the upcoming year. And along with that comes a lot of decision making that has to be done for us in fantasy. As you know, last year the Patriots had not the best offense that they could have ever possibly had last year. And due to that is because they just don't have the weapons, or they didn't have the weapons back then. They still don't really have the weapons now. So what can you really expect from them? They were 18th ranked in offense last year. And their two best offensive weapons, one barely had 1,000 yards and only 6 touchdowns in Julian Edelman. The next guy who had just fewer touchdowns were their two, but Philip Dorsett and James White. And James White had 72 receptions last year. So I'm pretty sure James White was the second leader in receptions, and he was their running back. So you can see how he works in their system. He had the 4th most fantasy points on their team in James White. And Edelman, of course, had the 2nd most. Tom Brady had the 1st. So that's not even a question, really. If we remove quarterback, of course, Julian is the 1st. Next is Sony Michel. And then it's James White. So we still have Julian Edelman. We still have James White, I believe. And I still believe that, actually, let me double check that James White is still there before I speak out of turn here. Man. James White is still there. So James White's still there. And, of course, Sony is still there. So I don't really want to call it a 1-2 punch between Sony Michel and James White, because they do different things for that offense. They don't expect Sony Michel to go out there catching passes. You know how many passes Sony Michel caught last year? 12. 12 receptions. 94 yards. He's not a pass catching back. But he was scouted as such coming out of college that he would be great as a pass catching back. And he'd be amazing in space and be able to make some things work. And he'd be the modern day running back, like Alvin Kamara, like Christian McCaffrey, the likes. Hasn't worked out like that so far, right? So, who do you look into drafting if you have to draft some Patriots? You still might have to rock with Sony Michel, James White, and Julian Edelman, because those are the only guys you can really trust on his offense. Mohamed Sanu got traded midway through the season. He did have 59 catches for 500 yards, but he only had 2 touchdowns, and when he did play, it didn't look the best. Maybe it was just because he wasn't acclimated properly, and maybe a full season will look better. But I wouldn't put my money where my mouth is unless you're in such a deep league to where Mohamed Sanu is making or breaking your roster right now. So I would try and look at it from a perspective of, if you're in a situation where you're needing more bang for your buck, you're probably going to go with James White over the other two, and here's why. I feel like James White is a guy who, Bill Belichick is going to find a way to utilize him to his best abilities. He doesn't have to worry about who's throwing him the ball because he's a flat route guy. It's not that hard to get a ball into the flats. A lot of guys are successful like that and play with a lot of different quarterbacks who are able to basically be the third down back, be the guy that comes in during the passing schemes, and able to make some noise. He's kind of like their tight end right now when it comes to touches, because they don't really have a tight end per se, because Benjamin Watson's done, and they just drafted a rookie after, of course, their tight end Lacoste caught only 13 passes, and it's not like Benjamin Watson was out here toting the rock. He only had 15 or 17 after the suspension, so we're really not seeing that much production from that position anyway. And they just drafted one in the draft this year, so we just have to see on that. But from pure numbers and just what we've seen and how they might use Stidham, I would have to assume that you have to choose the two running backs before you choose Edelman. We don't know what shape Edelman's going to come into. These two guys, and James White and Sony Michel, seem to have found the niche of what they're going to do. Now, granted, Sony Michel might be more disappointing, and I'm sure he was very disappointing to fantasy owners last year because they thought that he would take a leap, which in fact he did not, even though he did end up with almost 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns. That's just not enough for, I guess, where you probably took that running back in fantasy, I would assume, because I'm sure he went within the first 3 rounds, and that could have netted you some really, really quality players when you expected production that just didn't get there. So what I'm trying to say is, you can't really expect too much out of a Patriots offense when most of it was predicated around Tom Brady. And with Tom not being there, they have to rebuild their whole offensive persona. Tom covered a lot of weaknesses, as much as Tom had a lot of struggles himself last year, but it's undoubtedly, you can't doubt the fact that he came out and he helped that team look better than what it was, and that's the greatness of Tom Brady. And we're probably going to see a lot of that this coming year that we didn't notice because Tom was so good, right? And that's the thing we take for granted all the time, is that we have these great quarterbacks come in the league and they make people look so much better than what they really are, and changes your whole outlook on what is a quality football team. And I don't mean that to say that the Patriots would be nothing without Tom Brady. But what I'm saying is, some of these guys, we just forget how important sometimes the quarterback position is, especially when a quarterback of Tom Brady's caliber has been on one team for so long, in the league for so long. But you've never seen the Patriots struggle, especially at the quarterback position, really ever, besides a few distinct problems. When one was a suspension, one was an injury, both to Tom Brady. So we haven't really seen them struggle with quarterback problems since in the Bill Belichick era. Not to say that, and even when they did have quarterback problems, they still found a way to compete. Now, maybe you can say, oh, well, their division has been weak for X amount of years, which is very, very true. And a lot of people like to go to that ideology when it comes to the Patriots in general. But right now, their division is very strong, at least on paper. On paper, their division is very strong, and it's only looking to get better and better. And the Patriots have come into a time where if they want to compete for years to come, they're going to have to make some... They're putting a lot of faith... Well, I wouldn't say they're putting a lot of faith. They're putting some faith in Stidham right now. Of course, if things don't work out, they'll just move on. But I've never seen them really struggle to find a guy to help them keep afloat. And we have to give people like Bill Belichick the benefit of the doubt that he can keep this thing afloat, because in all other cases, he's proven that is what he can and will strive to do. It doesn't mean that they're going to be Super Bowl contenders. year in and year out for the remainder of this time frame. We don't even know if Bill Belichick will return to coach, right? We don't know if he's going to keep coaching. But at the end of the day, we do know that if he is coaching, he's going to go out there and try to compete at the highest level, and it doesn't matter who he puts out there. You have to respect it because somehow Bill Belichick knows better than we all do when it comes to this scouting and this. Well, let me not say scouting. Let me say he knows better when he puts guys on the field what they're capable of than we might ever do. And you can put out a testament to Jacoby Brissett. You can put out a testament to Garoppolo to an extent. He knew, and we didn't. And that's why he's the guy that a lot of people think is probably the best head coach of all time. All right. We're going to take a break here, and then we're going to get into some more quarterback stuff, but preferably about Cam Newton.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Okay, so for me, this Cam Newton situation is very surreal to me. Well, for one, I should say it's not surreal is maybe not the right word to use, but it's very interesting. It's very sad to me, I suppose. I think that Cam Newton deserves to be a starter in this league, only because I feel like we haven't really seen what Cam is right now. We don't know who Cam is, and I don't mean that as a philosophical question, like who is Cam Newton? Why does he wear these crazy clothes? Why is his hair? Why is he doing the freeform thing right now? And why can't people understand what freeform dreads are? I don't know. But I do know that we don't know Cam the player right now. We haven't seen Cam the player really at all in the past 2 years. Like you can't really, those games that he did start we haven't really seen him play in a legitimate 5-game stretch in a long time, and he hasn't looked good. He hasn't looked healthy. And now, of course, he's a free agent still. And before, he was very adamant, it seemed like, on finding a starting job. But in recent changes, have occurred in the National Football League as far as the quarterback situations, and now he's open to taking a backup role with the right team. So with everybody adjusting to a new normal, Cam Newton has started to realize that a starting job at a new home may not be in the cards for him, at least not immediately. So Cam Newton is still waiting for the right landing spot to open up, and reality has had ample time to set in and made Newton realize that it's time to find another route for employment in the National Football League. Ian Rappaport reports that is a significant change in communication from Newton's camp and has had maintained he wanted a legitimate chance to start wherever he signed. The problem with that, there are really only one team with a serious opening on their roster, and that's New England, which has demonstrated both in free agency and in activity in a draft, which the Patriots didn't select a quarterback, that it was proceeding forward with Jarrett Stidham and Brian Hoyer. So with that said, we'd like to see, backup roles might help out a bit, because then you might look at the Steelers, and the Steelers might be somebody they need to look into, because we don't know what Mason Rudolph can become, or Mr. Duck Hodges. Just don't know. And then there might be a fit in the Chargers before Justin Herbert went there. Now Jacksonville might be a fit. Maybe Leonard Fournette getting Jacksonville. But then again, Leonard Fournette was the guy who was like, let's get Cam Newton, and now he's on the trade block. Or they didn't pick up his option, but I don't think that was the icing on the cake for not picking up his option. So this is where we are right now with Cam Newton. He is a free agent till we see otherwise. I don't know where he's going to sign up in a backup role. I don't know where he's going to go. What I do know is I like to see first the season get started and going. Like, it's been tough, man. Like, they just released the schedule, which was nice, and they've done some creative videos. I saw the Panthers one, and it was really, really creative. I like the Panthers' creative team, very much so. And they made this really interesting video using all these internet pop culture references, and it was all based in the idea of staying home. And this one guy just staying home around and doing what he does at the house and looking up schedule, like the schedule is getting put on different things, different objects, and it's really, really creative and interesting. And I wish Cam was still there to be a part of something like that. I feel like using the brand of Cam Newton in that instance would have been awesome, but of course he's not with the team anymore, and that's a bit sad to say. It's the end of an era over there in Carolina and the start of a new one. So to speak on that, here we are. What does Carolina's new era look like? It's probably an era filled with DJ Moore, Christian McCaffrey, feasting around. I think those two are going to be feasting. I think DJ Moore is going to be an underrated receiving threat in fantasy. Heard it here right now. DJ Moore is going to be a quality guy. He caught passes from Kyle Allen, of all things, and he was one of their best receivers on that team. Outside of Christian McCaffrey, he might be the best one. And you can only assume he's going to get better. It's not like Teddy is worse than Kyle Allen. So I think that they can really find some chemistry along with the added addition of a even more potent offensive weapon. I mean, they tooled up their defense, so their offense, they feel pretty confident in their offense, I would assume, or at least that's what it's looking like it with Matt Rule and those guys over there in Carolina. They must be confident that their offense that they have now is good enough to get right. Now, DJ Moore was a first-round pick a few years ago, and it only makes sense that this is going to be how they're going to move forward. They didn't make any rash moves. They didn't make any reaches. They got who they needed to get in the draft. In free agency, they paid who they needed to pay. And, of course, you saw Christian McCaffrey got big time paid. So I think that's going to help bolster the outlook on this team because, of course, not to mention they signed a quarterback in free agency. So that's a big time move. What are we going to see from DJ Moore? I guess the way I look at it is this. We have to look up at the stats, right? And DJ Moore last year, 1,000-yard receiver, 1,175 yards. Only 4 touchdowns, though. But he had 87 receptions. The year prior, he had 55, 788, and had 2 touchdowns. So in his career, he has only had 6 touchdowns. But I would not say you gotta believe that a lot of those touchdowns didn't come his way, primarily because Christian McCaffrey, he ate them all up, right? His touchdowns, he had 15 touchdowns. That's just rushing yard touchdowns. He had 116 receptions, 287 rushing attempts. Are you kidding me? That's it. That's enough for 2 people. 2 different people could have gotten these statistics. Absolutely insanity. Look at this now. Look at this. He only had 4 receiving touchdowns. But this is the fact that this guy, Christian McCaffrey, had 2,000 total yards from scrimmage last year. 2,000 total yards from scrimmage. He is the best. He's the best offensive weapon in football, not named a quarterback. He's the best offensive weapon in fantasy, not named a quarterback. And it's not even close in fantasy. It's not close. He's competing with guys like Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. That is it. Everybody else is on a different tier. Michael Thomas is on a different tier. He's a tier below. And then everybody else. So Christian McCaffrey is pound for pound the best non-quarterback offensive weapon in football, fantasy-wise. And he's one of the best weapons in football-wise, not named quarterback anyway. He was in the MVP race for like a hot second when the Panthers still had a chance of doing something in the playoffs. It's unreal. Now he has somebody that actually he can depend on to throw him the football. Not to say that, Kyle Allen is some super scrub. He just wasn't it. And now he has somebody who has some talent and can really get him going, and he can get his other teammates involved. Carolina is looking to have a rebound year under Matt Rule, and it's going to be crazy. The NFC South is going to be a war zone of talent. It's going to be a war zone. A war zone, no Call of Duty. It's going to be a lot of banging and a lot of contention, man. It's going to be a lot of competing out there. As MJ would say, a lot of competition, a lot of competing. I like to compete. If you like to compete, go to the NFC South. It's where the big wigs go and roll the dice. It's going to be crazy, man. Like, that offensive team is set to do some things, I would say. So DJ Moore, I wouldn't say he's a sleeper, but he's definitely somebody that if you could get as your second overall receiver, that's a good pickup. Of course, Christian McCaffrey is going in the top 3. There's no question about it. And you might want to look at some other guys on that list, man. Other guys on that Panthers offense that might start to pop off. I would start to monitor some things and really start looking at what they're saying out of the camps when the season does start. All right, let's take another break, and we're going to get into some more fantasy news, or should I say NFL news right now? It's more NFL news than fantasy, but you catch my drift, man.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. so you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Frankie the Tanky. Big Frank. Big time Frank Gore. The man that just never quits on turning his legs. Probably a no doubt Hall of Famer just on longevity alone. 16 years in the NFL, and he just keeps on going, man. So Frank Gore last year, he was a guy that I was not a big fan of personally. I felt that he was stifling a man that I had on my roster in fantasy. Now don't get this out of proportion here. I like Frank Gore, the runner, and the person. But as far as fantasy-wise, he was hurting me. He was hurting me bad. So Frank Gore, last year in Buffalo, 599 yards rushing on 166 attempts, 2 TDs. Had his longest run, I believe, was 41 yards. And he averaged 3.6 yards per carry in 8 games he started. So he started 8 games, but he played all 16. And as far as the receiving, he didn't do a lot of that. He only was targeted 13 times, or he was targeted 16, made 13 catches, 100 yards, and no touchdowns. And that was Frank Gore's season last year. As you know, Delvin Singletary had a spectacular rookie season, despite his numbers kind of being weird with having to deal with the Frank Gore starting stuff going on and the toting of the rock that really occurred. But this is all going to change now for Mr. Delvin Singletary. So the Delvin Singletary stock is up, man. It is moving on up, and I'm a fan of it. So it's moving up because Frank Gore is no longer a Buffalo Bill. Well, he was a free agent, I believe, and he's signing a 1-year deal with the New York Jets. So another AFC North, AFC North team once again, AFC East. I keep thinking, sometimes it switches in my head. AFC East, the Jets are signing veteran Frank Gore. So they're signing the future Hall of Fame running back to a 1-year deal, according to his agent, Drew Rosenhaus. And that's who was told by Ian Rappaport. So apparently, NFL Network defensive coordinator Greg Williams is absolutely in love that they signed him. His leadership will be huge for them, and he has tremendous respect for him as a player and competitor. He's been one of the best he's had the game plan against. So Gore is going to turn 37 in 9 days, and he will enter his 16th season in the NFL with his 5th different organization after spending the last 2 years with the Dolphins and with the Bills. And now in New York, Gore will reunite with Adam Gase, who coached the running back in Miami in 2018 and led to his team in rushing attempts and yardage. So this has to be, we look at this for what? Le'Veon Bell news, because we know who is supposed to be the bell cow, quote unquote, in that organization for running purposes. But recently, they were looking to lighten his load and not make everything on Le'Veon Bell all the time. This was a quote from Adam Gase a little bit over a week ago that this is something actively that the organization is trying to do to limit his role, because Le'Veon Bell, even though he's still 28, he's not getting any younger, and he does have a lot of tread on his tires. So when we saw what was the result of him having really to do everything behind an O-line that was not the best, their offense was completely horrible. Offense was ranked 31st in the league, and it was just not quality. And they were ranked 34th. They were ranked 31st in scoring offense and 31st in rushing. So you can just see this was not going to work out. And without a stable O-line and no viable backup, injuries are just going to be crazy. And not to mention what went down with Sam Darnold and the mono, and that just really derailed their season. So we don't really know what they can look like now. But if Frank Gore can get 1,380 rushing yards, he will pass Walter Payton for second all-time, and he passed Barry Sanders for third all-time last November. And while it's unlikely Gore will pass him in 2020, Gore will assuredly be the number 2, barring any injury to Le'Veon Bell. And he hasn't tallied that many yards in the season since 2006. So it's it'll take maybe 2-3 seasons worth to get to this mark of second all time in rushing. You know, his son is starting his college career. You know that? That's insane. He's still playing football and still playing at a level that's credible. He's still playing at a credible level. Granted, he had his lowest carrying yard average this year, but it wasn't really anything crazy. When he was in Indianapolis, he only carried the ball like 3, or his yards per average was 3 point in the high 3s. Same thing here last year. In Miami, he had a 4.6 yard average, but he had more yardage, and he only played 14 games back then. So, as we can see, he hasn't had a supreme rushing yard performance on a yearly basis since 2006, his second year in the league, after a rookie season of 600 yards, 3 touchdowns, but he only started 1 game, and he had 300 touches on that point in time, and he never got, he got nowhere. He only got near 300 touches again in 2011 with San Francisco. So other than that, and then another year in 2013, he was at 276. So he hasn't really been near 300 touches since then, and of course, he's been way, way down since 2017. He's been limited to about 150, 160 in touches per attempts, per year. And that seems to be where Frank Gore needs to be. Now, should you be worried that Frank Gore is on the Jets roster? Maybe. And I mean maybe by, it's not like we need to know what Le'Veon is capable of when he gets to going, like we needed to know with Devin Singletary, because Devin Singletary is a rookie and we didn't know how he was going to be acclimated into the offense. We know just where the focal points of the Jets offense are, which is Le'Veon, which is their newly drafted receiver, and Sam Darnold is in there as well. So we know where the focal points are. Frank Gore is not going to steal the show, but Frank Gore is going to eat into some carries. Frank Gore is going to take some attempts away from Le'Veon, but this might mean a fresher Le'Veon, and this might mean Le'Veon in fewer just rushing attempts that are going to be pointless anyway, and maybe some more meaningful yardage to be made up in the passing game, which Le'Veon is been missed by a lot of guys in the fantasy realm. We missed the Le'Veon flat routes, the Le'Veon screens. Maybe we can see some more of those start appearing up and see him used like he used to be used in the Steelers camp in Pittsburgh. So I think that's what a lot of people want to see Le'Veon get back to, is being more of the all-purpose, all-pro back that he was when he was literally dominating from yards of scrimmage. He was like Christian McCaffrey before Christian McCaffrey. Now, Christian McCaffrey is on a whole another stratosphere, like I said earlier, but it's the same purpose. It's the same ideology. You want to be able to use your players to their best ability, and Le'Veon is one of those guys that can do so many things with the football in his hands. He can catch, he can run, and he's very patient with the ball. But if you're just going to keep running him up and down the middle of the field, and you're not going to run him, off tackle or get him out in space, you're really, really limiting his ability to do what he does best. And I don't believe that is what Adam Gase or the Jets really want to do, especially with a guy they paid that money for, that at the time we thought he'd get more. And the more you look at it, his deal, it's not as favorable as you'd like it to be, but it's definitely more realistic now to compare what he got and now what we're seeing with everybody else is getting in the league and just where the running back market is. But to wrap up this segment, I would like to say that, for one, Frank Gore, congratulations, you're still in the league again. And two, Le'Veon might have dropped a little bit in draft stock, but it shouldn't really worry too much, in my opinion, just because Le'Veon probably can get the ball in other ways now, more efficiently. All right, let's take another break here, and coming back, we're going to be talking about how Andy Dalton is going to be the piece that determines a lot for the Cowboys this upcoming season.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Okay, real quick, before we get into the Dak Prescott, the Andy Dalton, the Jerry Jones stuff, I wanted to get into what I just thought in my head, because I've been having some allergy problems recently. And not to say that I've never had allergies before in my life. I've grown up with allergies my whole time. But it's been a little bit challenging to deal with being a podcaster, talking all the time, and dealing with allergies, because they're so unpredictable sometimes. And you never know when you're going to have a really bad day or just a kind of bad day or anything like that. So just a quick shout out to whoever created allergy medication. They did the job, man. Let me tell you something. If I can't imagine a world where there's no allergy medication in, I think I would die. That would be it. I think that would be it for me. I would be out of here real quick and in a hurry without allergy medication, because some days it really does suck, man. It's the worst. And if you skip a day on your allergy medication, man, you're really, really messing with the dice game right there. And I don't really like to roll the dice too much. But that was it. I just wanted to get a quick in right there, because I feel like my voice is a bit raspy today, and it's due to the high pollen count here in the great peach state of Georgia. That's where I'm at. A bunch of pollen and pine trees, pine cones. That's what we got down here. But let's get right into the actual segment here. It's about Andy Dalton signing with the Cowboys. It's I believe a 1-year, $3 million baseline deal, which can go up to $7 million with incentives if, he gets on the field. So you know what this is, right? This is a play. This is the Jerry Jones playbook, and he's using it, man. It's getting out there, and he is doing what he needs to do to make sure that Dak deal gets finished at a time frame that he enjoys. One, he wants to get the deal done. Two, he wants to know that if the deal doesn't get done, he has security. And it's probably the smartest move he's done outside of the draft, where he did the right thing and drafted CeeDee Lamb to tag along with Amari Cooper out there. So now you don't have to worry about this, because this team, the Cowboys, are a good team on paper. They were a good team on paper last year. They underachieved by all different stretches of the word underachieved. The Cowboys underachieved. And they had a talented roster last year. Now their roster is very talented. Granted, they lost Byron Jones, but that's okay. They'll make up for it. And their offense makes up for it for sure if they can get the ball rolling. And they understand that Dak is a big part of their offense. I think most people understand that Dak is a big part of their offense. But if Dak is going to be in this contract struggle, in this contract dispute, or anything like that, here we are. It's going to be closer to preseason or whatever is going to happen, right? And Dak may not be signed, or he may not be showing up to camp for money reasons. And Jerry Jones is not going to have that. We're in an unprecedented amount of time where we don't know what our season is going to look like. And we don't know how many games are going to get postponed or delayed, or how the play is even going to be like. And Jerry Jones is like, this is the best roster we've really had in a long time, since maybe 2014. And you're going to tell me that that this whole thing lives or dies with the fact that Dak Prescott may not want to play without getting paid first, which, I mean, that's Dak's right. And I fully support Dak doing whatever it is to get his money. But I also support Jerry Jones being a businessman in this sort of situation and being, hey, if that's how you want to play it, that's what we're going to do. I'm not going to sit here and essentially cost us a beginning of a season or however long, if a holdout does happen, when I can just go get a quarterback right now in the market that can at least hold on to the ship, that may not lose you games. He's going to do that. And I have to applaud Jerry. This was the right move. If you would have got Cam Newton, I would have said, oh, this might be a little dangerous, because I think Cam has more in the tank right now than Andy Dalton as far as upside. But at the same time, you can't be mad at this role. We're not going to sit here and think like, oh man, Andy Dalton's going to be their guy. Like, no one's thinking that. But if you bring in Cam, now it's a whole different sort of firestorm. But you bring in Andy Dalton is the type of dude that we're like, okay, you understand he's your bridge guy until this Dak thing gets settled. And it's insurance. It's Dak insurance, really. If Dak does not come out and play, you have a guy that you can trust behind for a little bit. A guy who you know can sling the football. He may not be the best decision maker, and he may play a little bit safe sometimes, but you know he can at least throw the football fairly well. And on his best day, he's a pretty good quarterback. On his best day, he's a starting quarterback. So that's what Jerry Jones did. He made the safe play. This was an Ozark level signing for Jerry Jones. This is Yacht Jerry once again, as I said on the GSMC the football podcast with Bryce. Yacht Jerry has been making a lot of quality moves that I can't say anything but good job, Jerry. You're doing it. You're figuring out this thing here on making decisions based on team need and team potential. And what you've learned was that a little bit over another summer ago, you had a similar situation with a running back, and you had to cough up a lot of money, a lot of moolah, a lot of change to set running back. And he came back sluggish, and granted, it did not ruin your season. It did not ruin your season that Ezekiel Elliott came out of his vacation or out of his holdout a bit in shape. He was not in shape, right? It didn't ruin the season because you started off well anyway. But by the time he worked himself into shape, it was the season just didn't work out the way you would like it to. And maybe we were rating the Cowboys too high early on, like we always do when they have a little baby schedule. But this has to have been really, really, this must have been a revelation for Jerry. Jerry can't mess around with this run because, for one, he probably doesn't know how much longer he got. I would have to imagine that I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to keep doing this thing. So I got to be able to do this right so that way he gives his team and his organization, his franchise, the best chance of going out there with a ring or getting playoff contention, at least make it to the AFC Championship game. They haven't been there in God knows how long. So here we are once again. Jerry Jones is he's not really trying to steal the show. He's not trying to show who's boss. He's saying, okay, if you're going to hold out, come try and get your money. But just know that I'm prepared for your holdout. You're not stifling my team to the point to where you're crippling us, you're hurting us with your holdout, because I can't have that again. I can't have that right now because this team is good, and I believe in you, Dak. I believe in you, but you got to work with me. And if you can't work with me in the sense of coming to camp and playing while the negotiations happen, then I'm sorry, but we're going to have to start Andy. And you can't be mad at Jerry Jones for doing something like that. Just like you can't be mad at Dak Prescott for sitting down or potentially sitting down for contract disputes because he wants more money. Every quarterback has done it. Every quarterback has sat through and said, okay, I want to make more money for my next contract, and this is not what I'm looking like. And I don't want this franchise tag, and I'm going to figure out a way to get the money that I deserve. And that's what they're going to do. That's what Dak is going to do. That's what makes sense in the type of moment. And you know what Dak wants. He doesn't want this super long-term deal. He wants a shorter deal, around 3 years, so that way he can renegotiate for a bigger contract later on down the line. And that's what a smart person would do. Game the system that has been gaming him his whole life. It's all right. We're going to take another break. And coming back, we're going to be talking about the best budget quarterbacks for this year's fantasy season.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Okay, so this segment, it's going to be a lot of fun. I like it, the idea of it, finding out which quarterbacks are going to be ones that you can get in small amounts of auction drafts, so I mean small amounts of money, and or later rounds of the draft, and you can hold off and wait, maybe even pick up on the waivers. So this is where you need to really think about your strategies and things like that. But without further ado, let's go. So first on the list of budget quarterbacks you probably should look into is Matt Ryan. I think Matt Ryan's stock might have fallen a little bit from last season, as you know, the offensive weaponry on his team has not changed too much. He's lost more weapons than he's gained. Still has Julio. He still has Calvin Ridley. He doesn't have Austin Hooper anymore, but he does get Jaden Hurst as far as exchange it. He loses Devontae Freeman, but he wasn't that big of a offensive weapon for them in late anyway. And then they get, of course, Todd Gurley in free agency after he was let go by the Rams. So they have some weapons. It's kind of an interesting hodgepodge. We know their wide receivers are pretty good. They have a good tandem there. Julio is been top 5 wide receiver really since the second year in the league, and then he's been teamed up with an Alabama alum of him, or Alabama player himself, and Calvin Ridley, who we really haven't seen have the year yet, but it could be coming now. It could be coming soon. So maybe this is the year Calvin Ridley's time has finally arrived as a playmaker wide receiver out there, because I think he has a lot of potential to be. And maybe playing next to Julio has been more of a stunt of his growth as of recent rather than something that has really helped him flourish and mature. But I say Matt Ryan is somebody who you know what you're going to get. He's a quality starter quarterback. He's one of the better ones in the league, but he doesn't always light it up in fantasy sometimes, and it can be kind of wishy-washy depending on what the schedule looking at, who's playing against, what's happening with the offensive line. And he hasn't been super hot fire since, of course, the Super Bowl run. That's really it. You don't know what you're going to get from Matt Ryan all the time, but you do know his floor, and his floor is basically what he gets in year out. And you only get him sometime, like, you're probably banking more so the fact that he'll get to his floor, which is about 18, 20 a game, fantasy points wise. And you just hope that he'll have a better game than that, but you can always count on that 20 to come through. It's sort of the same thing with Drew Brees, but Drew Brees has a more consistent level. But in recent time, Drew Brees gets the ball down the field, but the running game has really taken New Orleans by storm as far as touchdowns given, and he hasn't necessarily lit up the passing game in a long time as far as touchdowns are concerned, and big fantasy numbers are concerned as well. So I'd say those two are probably budget right now. Those are not going to be hot commodity quarterbacks coming out of the gate. I would say in similar fashion, we have to look at people like Matthew Stafford. We have to look at guys like, of course, our favorite purple boy out there, Kirk Cousins. So there's the thing about Kirk Cousins, as I'm probably gonna go off on this for a bit. Kirk Cousins has had some of the better wide receiver tandems, plus a really, really quality tight end since he's been there. He loses Stephon Diggs because it seems to be Stephon Diggs is not a big fan of Kirk Cousins, and they ended up drafting another wide receiver, another purple boy at LSU, and Justin Jefferson. If they can figure something out, that's a pretty electric combo. But they're a run-first offense anyway. So without Dalvin Cook, we don't really know where that offense is going to be. But if Dalvin Cook can stay healthy and they can keep going and they can get the play action going, and then you can see Adam Thielen still gets his numbers. And I can only imagine that Justin Jefferson will get his numbers too. They're a really good team. Really solid team. I would not be afraid of getting, I wouldn't be afraid of drafting Kirk Cousins, especially for the cheaper side. Not looking for upside, but looking for a quarterback. If you really are desperate and need a quarterback who's going to start, be decent enough to not sell you out, like they're not going to get 15 or something like that, but he'll get you 18. He'll get you 19. He'll get you 23 on a quality day, but if he wants to start playing quarterback for real and not mistake-free football, but actually, be a quarterback, he can get you there. And I wouldn't have a problem with taking him, like maybe $7 or $8 even. I'd get him there. That type of range, I'd get him there. So now moving to a tier up, because that was more of the kind of the baseline drafting tier. Everything underneath that is probably somebody you could pick up on waivers anyway. So let's look at it from this perspective. A tier up would be the Josh Allens. You may have some tier 2 guys up there. So, not tier 2, but year 2 guys. So maybe Kyler Murray might be out there. But now everybody's thinking that Kyler Murray is going to be the new Lamar Jackson. especially with weapons newly added to his arsenal. So we do have to keep that in mind. But guys like Baker Mayfield are probably in that next tier where you're going to be able to see where the potential is to take a leap in their game, right? They have the roster, they have the personnel, but do they have the skill to really bring it out and really flourish with these new weapons and really, really make a big push in the quarterback room? I would say Carson Wentz is probably in this tier as well, but the thing about Carson Wentz is the health thing. Like, really, it's the health thing. Unfortunately, we don't really know if Carson Wentz can stay on the field for a whole season. He hasn't done it since his rookie season in the league, so we really don't know just what we're getting out of him physically. And that's always going to be an issue until we see otherwise. But those guys are probably going to, their rosters are talented enough to get it done. And if you want to take, I wouldn't say it's a risk, it's probably more calculated than that, especially with everybody else on the list besides Carson. If you're looking for a guy with more upside potential, and especially someone like Josh Allen, who still makes a lot of his points up running the ball, it's a good investment to make. And then there's the rookies. So we have to get to the rookies real quick. I think Joe Burrow is a guy, of course, who probably has most upside, but it's upside potential as far as being a breakout guy. I don't mean as in being a quality starter, because I think that Herbert may also have a chance of being a really good quality starter. And I think that Tua, depending on how good the offensive line really is, has a chance too. And that's the same thing with Joe Burrow. But I feel like Joe Burrow has the intangibles to really, really shine in a system like Cincinnati, where not everything is perfect. But he has two really, really talented wide receivers, one who's a seasoned veteran, and another one who they just drafted in T. Higgins. So I would have to believe that Joe Burrow has a really, really good shot of making a big splash at some point in the season. It may not be starting off right away, but same thing with Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray didn't start off the best last season, but he really, really caught fire near the tail end. And that's why a lot of people are really looking at him as a guy who can take another step next year or this coming season and be able to really, really show growth and really, really explode like a Lamar Jackson did. But I don't know if it'll be as big because we've never saw an explosion like Lamar before, really ever in our lives in fantasy wise. So that's it. Justin Herbert, he might be good. I think Justin Herbert might be a guy you have to look at and be, okay, if he starts day one, you may not want to start Justin Herbert day one. But if he starts, like week 4 or something like that, you may want to take a flyer out there on him because you never really know what scheme. You might get a Daniel Jones situation. Daniel Jones gets put in, has himself a hell of a game, and then, the rest is history. But that's just kind of how sometimes the NFL works. Not everybody scouts the same way. But we're going to take our final break, and then we're going to come back.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Okay, so I wanted to end the podcast off doing a little bit of bold predictions. I don't really do this often because I don't like being wrong. I don't really like being wrong too much, but I want to have some fun. You only live one life. You only live once. Might as well figure some things out and take some risk. Roll the dice. That seems to have been the little podcast motif of recent. Roll the dice. So we're going to start rolling some dice. So First bold prediction I'm going to say for the season and probably fantasy. Here we go. The best rookie offensively, let's keep this in mind, offensive rookie. The best offensive rookie this season will not be a quarterback. I think that the potential of seeing CeeDee Lamb with the Cowboys offense already as potent as it is, already established, knows its identity. I think this is the case. This is the one where you look at and say instant impact immediately at the start, tremendous talent offensively, tremendous route runner. This is not, I don't think anybody makes mistakes on this wide receiver stuff when it comes to knowing when somebody's ready to come in and play. Like Odell, I felt Odell didn't really spark off until the catch because a lot of people didn't know. But I knew Odell coming out of the league, he was going to be somebody that was really talented, but no one knew if all the talent would come together. Well, it did come together for Odell, and I think CeeDee Lamb, in similar respects, is a guy who everybody knows his talents. And we just didn't know where he was going to end up if he'd have a quarterback to be there in his, as to be able to guide him in a way that he would grow with and be able to really learn from. So getting drafted by the Cowboys changed the whole trajectory of his first season. He could really come in, and if we can see something like, you know, DK Metcalf coming in and catching like, I don't know, 60 balls and he had like 1,000 yards. No, did he have 1,000 yards? He had really close. He had some numbers up this season. I'm sorry, he didn't have 1,000 yards. I'm pretty sure he had like 700. He was very close. And he really had a bigger impact later on down in the season anyway. And in the playoffs, of course, we saw his impact on firsthand. If DK can do this, and he was on limited route running, now granted they're a different team, different makeup, but I would believe with Dak, with Ezekiel Elliott, with Amari Cooper already there, their offensive coordinator still there, their offensive line is really good. CeeDee is in a perfect position to have one of the better rookie seasons out of a offensive player we've ever seen. And I don't want to feel like I'm overstating that. I really do believe that CeeDee has the talent to do that, and he's one of the best wide receivers in the class, arguably the best, and he's in the best situation of any wide receiver really in the class as of right now that came out in the first round. So that's number one. Prediction number 2. Okay, you ready for this? Alvin Kamara, through 10 games, will have 8 or more touchdowns. Alvin Kamara had a really, really down year as far as the touchdowns and numbers concerned because there's so many factors that went on with the Saints offense. The emergence of Taysom Hill being this real do-it-all guy, when he really came from, you know, doing scout team, and then he was on the kickoffs, and then he was doing the punt defenses, and then blocking on punt returns and all this stuff. So it was a whole different stratosphere of change when he really got more integrated. He started running more tight end stuff, started doing more, you know, wildcat offense oriented stuff because we really didn't see him throw the ball too much last year. Anyway, here we are. Taysom Hill is the second quarterback on the roster as far as depth chart is concerned, but they still want to use Taysom Hill the same way they have been creatively in the past. But I have to believe that they realize that Taysom Hill is not somebody they're going to try and run through the ground with these creative offensive sets. Because if they really truly believe Taysom Hill is the guy to bridge them over after the Drew Brees era, they got to protect him somehow. They already made one way of protecting, and that was getting Jameis Winston to be their backup, so to speak. And another thing is that for Alvin Kamara's sake, we have to make sure and remember that Drew Brees did go down for quite a significant amount of time. And Latavius Murray ate more during that time than Alvin Kamara did because their offense had to change. Their scheme had to change to fit Teddy Bridgewater. And that meant that Alvin Kamara was not really getting out in space, out in traffic as much as he did the season prior. And when Drew Brees finally came back, it was still kind of more of the same. It wasn't not much change. He wasn't getting into the end zone very much. And it wasn't really the fact that he wasn't getting them to the end zone. It was that guys like Taysom Hill, guys like, new emergencies in the offense that just started to come around, where we started to feed tight ends like Jared Cook and things like that. So they started to really eat up near the back half of the season. And Alvin Kamara was more of I wouldn't want to say utility, but he was a guy that was not in the same sort of super attack mode down the field guy that we saw him flourish in the first 2 years of his career. So I would like to see him return to that and be the guy that we know that he can be. And I'm predicting that he will, because I think that the Saints realize that their offense desperately needs Alvin Kamara to be as creative and as structurally free as possible comparative to what happened last year. And the circumstances didn't help either in that regard. All right. So that's another one. I think the last one here, we're going to go and look at the AFC, because we only have one king in the NFL. That's the Chiefs. They won. They're the kings. They are the title defenders for the next year. And of course, we know the Ravens are there as well, who are knocking on their door ever so slightly. Who's next, though? Who is the third team in the AFC? I've been doing some thinking and been looking around, trying to feel some things out. I think the next logical team in the AFC has to be the Titans. And that's just based off of their prowess and record of last year. They didn't really lose anybody. They bring back the thing that worked. Their defense is still pretty good. And if nobody can stop Derrick Henry, they're going to keep winning games. And it was really dependent on how I felt about the Steelers, because I think the Steelers defense is really, really outstanding. The problem is their offense is so abysmal, or it was so abysmal last year, that you can't even think about the Steelers really competing. But you got to remember, the Steelers only missed the playoffs by the fact that, circumstantial. They didn't have a positive record. They didn't have a negative record. It's a miracle the record they got last year considering what they had out there on the field anyway. But I think the Titans are probably the third best team, and everything else is really wide open. But all right, that is going to be it for the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, hosted on GSMC Podcast Network. I'd encourage everyone who likes my voice or doesn't like my voice or whatever, rate and review us, figure us out. Give us a message, drop us a hint on how you feel we are doing here on GSMC. Don't forget to watch all the other content, listen to all the content, check us out on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and the Twitters. This is for GSMC. It's Ethan signing out. See you all next week.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.